All right, boys and girls, this is my recording of Social Studies, page 58. So this is chapter 2, lesson 1. Why did the Spanish explore the Americas is the main question here. A time to change in Europe. So I will be asking some questions, and I want you to think about these questions because you will have a test on this. During the Middle Ages, the period between ancient and modern time, most Europeans rarely traveled. However, towards the end of the period, they began making pilgrimages, or religious journeys, to Christian holy sites. Some went as far away as areas in Middle East considered the Holy Land by the Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The contact with new regions made Europeans desire goods from foreign lands. Soon, a new class of Europeans developed, merchants, who made their living by buying and selling goods. They prospered especially in Italian port cities like Venice. They traded for their gems, silks, and spices of China and the East Indies, the islands of Southeast Asia. Members of one Venetian family, the Polos, actually traveled to China themselves and met with the great ruler Kublai Khan. On a second journey, they took 17-year-old Marco Polo. He returned to Italy years later and told the wonders he had seen. His impressions were recorded in a book now called The Travels of Marco Polo, which further stirred people's imaginations. Another person who encouraged Europeans to travel to new lands was Prince Henry of Portugal, whose sailors explored the west coast of Africa in the early 1400s. So here we have a couple the timeline showing Marco Polo returns from China in 1295. Prince Henry, close to 1425 of Portugal, begins sponsoring explorations of the west coast of Africa. 1453, Ottoman Turks capture Constantinople. 1488, Portugal's Bartholomew Diaz sails around Africa to the Indian Ocean. 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. 1492, Christopher Columbus reached the New World. 1498, Portugal's Vasco da Gama reaches India by sea. In 1522, Spanish Magellan Elcano expedition completes voyage around the world. So some questions here I want to ask are, according to the text, what two experiences stirred Europeans' interest in foreign travel? So why were they traveling? According to the text, end of the period, they went for religious journeys. So one of them was for religious journeys called pilgrimage. So let's see what another one. Another one was Marco Polo. So when Marco Polo, his book was published, a lot of people started to want to explore because they started reading. So the book, people started reading it. They started to go and want to explore some more areas. Now, those of you that did the brain pop, you saw that. All right. What is a merchant? Well, it shows us right here what a merchant is. They made their living by buying and selling goods. So when someone buys some pencils and decides to sell them to someone else, they become a merchant. But if I buy pencils just to buy pencils for myself, that wouldn't be a merchant. A merchant is someone who makes a living buying and selling goods. So they have to do both. Why were Europeans interested in China and the East Indians? Well, let's look. It said something about gems. So I think that was a part of it. So we see here they're interested in gems, silks, and spices from China and the East Indies. So those are the two words. To which Chinese ruler's court did Marco Polo and his family travel? Those of you who have already done the brain pop with this know it was Kublai Khan. Okay? So they traveled to Kublai Khan. So we know that the people from Europe in the Middle Ages, towards the end, they wanted to make religious pilgrimages, trade for unusual goods from foreign lands, and see the world as Marco Polo had. That's why they decided to start traveling. Let's move on. Again, those of you that did the brain pop, you've seen this before, heard of this. Trade with Asia usually moved along a route called the Silk Road. It was named for the product much in demand, Chinese silk. Sometimes goods from China came by sea because the Chinese had made many advances in sailing. Goods from the East Indies also came partly by sea, but whether entirely or only partly over land, the trade from Asia had to pass through the Middle East to reach Mediterranean Sea and Italy. So here we go. We see a picture here of the Silk Road is the green. So there would be some travel around because the Chinese understood how, but most of the time they would have to go through here. Okay? Or sometimes they did travel through here. There was a little passageway called the Suez Canal that they could go through. Notice something, that there is this place right here that seems to be in the middle of the route. In 1453, the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople, now Istanbul, Turkey. They cut off most European trade through the Middle East. European leaders began to sponsor or pay for voyages of exploration. They hoped to make their countries rich by finding new trade routes that did not go through the Middle East. Important advances in navigation or the science of guiding a boat made this possible. So I want you to understand, Constantinople, this place right here, was a very important part of the travel. A lot of people went there to get their goods. Merchants had to go through there. And I know this doesn't show it, but the route normally had to go through there as well. The Silk Road. And then the Ottomans came in. And when the Ottomans came in, they owned most of this land. So they kind of cut people off from trading this way. So they started to go a different route. So they started traveling all over and trying to get around to the silk on their own. Okay, so when the Ottoman, in 1453, Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople, now Istanbul, Turkey, they cut off most of European trade from the Middle East. So that's an important thing to know. So they said, nope, can't go through here. So now people had to navigate. Navigation is a science of guiding a boat made to go around. So they had to wait for this new technology to be created in order for the navigation to happen. During the age of exploration, Europeans was bursting with religious conflicts and change. Spain wished to become an even more powerful country after recapturing land it had lost to invading people from North Africa. Spaniards called this violent recapturing of territory the Reconquista. The Protestant Reformation caused many people who were upset with the Roman Catholic Church to break away and form new churches. Some people wished to stay and improve the Catholic Church, an effort called the Counter-Reformation. Competing religion, ideas, and countries would become key drives of the age of exploration. So we have the church. The Roman Church was a main church, but there were people within the church called the Counter-Reformation, and then people who wanted to take away from the church, move away from the church, called the Protestant Reformation. They both were not happy with the Roman Church. All right, so I have some questions for you on this. Why was a trade route with Eastern Asia called the Silk Road? Why was it called the Silk Road? It said it right here. It was named for the production demand Chinese silk. All right. What role did the Ottoman Turkey play in encouraging Europeans to seek trade routes that did not go through the Middle East? Well, since they closed off, right, they cut off people from the Middle East. So the Ottoman Turks cut off people, and now people had to start going in different directions. For the Spanish, what was a goal of the Reconquista? So we're going to look at the Reconquista is right here. Okay? Spanish wished to become an even more powerful country after recapturing land. Okay? From the invading people from the North Africa. Okay, so those were called the Moors. What role did the religion play in Spanish involvement in the Age of Exploration? So religion also became part of the reason people started going around looking for new places. They wanted more land to claim. Okay. All the routes here go through the Mediterranean, so now they had to go around. They were trying to go around. They were going on land to Asia, but then when the Ottoman came in, they had to close off. They closed it off, so people started traveling by boat.